Hello, my name is Peter Jezzard. I'm the editor of Magnetic Resonance Medicine, and I want to spend a few minutes telling you about some of the efforts that MRM has made in the area of reproducible research. So in terms of MRM scope and purpose, we predominantly publish in the areas of NMR imaging and electron paramagnetic resonance imaging, and we also tend to be on the method side, so our main readership is physicists and engineers. MRM has got a fairly long record of encouraging reproducible research. Our policy at the moment is that we strongly encourage, but we don't strictly require the sharing of code and data in our papers. We also strongly encourage, but we don't strictly require a data availability statement. And we also invite reviewers to amplify on the issue of reproducible research and code and data sharing if they wish to in their reviews. And indeed, motivated reviewers can, of course, download any code and data that might be provided by the authors. More recently, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, we've introduced the facility of a code review that's in partnership with the ISMRM Reproducible Research Study Group. I should note that this is independent of the scientific peer review process. So in terms of our track record of reproducible research, this is an editorial from back in 2019 by the then editor-in-chief Matt Bernstein. You can also see Nicola Stikov is a co-author on this editorial, which, and I know that Nicola's in the audience today. So this is an editorial encouraging authors to think more about reproducibility in their research. Also, Matthew Boudreau, who is in the audience and is about to give the next talk, has hosted a blog on behalf of the journal. This is MRM Highlights blog, in which he, for the last couple of years, has focused on authors who have made a special effort to promote reproducible research in their papers. And I would encourage you to go and have a look at his blog if you'd like to know more about those papers. Also, we have instigated a data availability statement. We actually made this a facility in 2020. And so authors are encouraged, but as I say, not required to include a data availability statement in their papers. This is an example of the reviewer score sheet in which we make ask the explicit question about whether the authors have gone to special efforts in support of reproducible research. And for those papers that do, we highlight them in our contents list, which is circulated to our subscribers. This is a more recent editorial from 2022 in which Matthew and Nicola looked at the impact of that first editorial, but also of the inclusion of the data availability statement that was introduced in 2020. So what they actually did was they did a keyword search looking for keywords associated with reproducible research in papers published between 2019 and 2021 in the journal, just to see what the trends were and whether there'd been any impact in the introduction of these new facilities. And what they found was that whereas papers in 2019, about 1 in 10 authors had provided code and/or data, they found that by 2021 it was more like 1 in 3, so quite a significant increase. And you can see some other statistics there about the particular form of code that was provided. And I was intrigued and interested to see that MATLAB has been slowly dropping off over the years, whereas Python, I guess because of its open access nature, has become more prevalent in the codes that is provided. But what I really want to tell you about is the code review, which is something that was proposed by the ISMRM Reproducible Research Study Group in April 2023. So the leadership of that study group approached me in the spring of 23 and suggested that their members would be willing to provide a facility of a code review to those authors who wished to engage in that process. So we discussed the actual processes in the spring and summer of 2023, and by August of 23, we were able to roll it out to our authors. As I've mentioned, it's separate to the scientific review process, so the scientific reviewers of the paper don't know that the authors have requested or not requested a code review, and they also don't know the outcome of that code review until the end of the process. It's initiated for papers that survive first review. So this is so that we don't waste the time of our study group members on papers that are not going to be accepted by the journal. Most papers that survive first review, not all, but most papers make it through to publication. And so those papers that are going to be rejected tend to be rejected on the first cycle. So it's only after first review that we initiate the code review process if the author has requested it. And then the code is given either a pass, a conditional pass, or a fail outcome. And for those that are given a pass or a conditional pass, assuming that they meet the conditions, the authors are invited to add a statement to their acknowledgements that acknowledges the reproducible research study group and also states that it has passed a code review. In terms of the code reviewers themselves, we recognize them in the same way that we recognize the scientific reviewers when we're recognizing them at our annual meeting. So this is the actual statement that authors are invited to add to their acknowledgements if they pass a code review. And it thanks the Reproducible Research Study Group. It gives an explicit version number for the code that's been reviewed. And it points out that the code review covered only the code's ease of download, the quality of the documentation, its ability to run, and it didn't consider the scientific accuracy and code efficiency. So in terms of how we've got on, we've been running this for about a year now. Typically, we get about 400 papers per year that are published, and about 50 of those so far have had a code review. That's in the last 12-month window. Of those, 34% passed, 48% conditionally passed, and 18% failed. So if you look at those second two categories, that means that 2/3 of data availability statements had some issue with the code that was provided. And usually this is missing functions or poor documentation, whatever it might be, that the authors have overlooked a problem with the code that meant that it really wasn't going to be terribly useful to the community. Most of these things are sorted out during the review process, such that by the time the paper is published, most of these data availability statements contain links to code which is properly functioning. So finally, I'd like to obviously acknowledge Matthew and Nicola. I'd like to acknowledge the Reproducible Research Study Group of the ISMRM who provide these code reviews. And finally, I want to thank the Canadian Open Neuroscience Platform and the Quebec Bioimaging Network for helping to support Matthew, who's been involved in all aspects of these reproducible research projects undertaken at the journal. Finally, I just want to draw your attention to this magazine, MRM Highlights, which was published at our annual meeting in Singapore recently, but it's also available online. And in particular, it includes an article on the code reviewing process so far from the perspective of both the authors and the reviewers. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day today.